I dedicated a year of my life working on 2 paintings, which is a massive risk for any artist to spend that amount of time on only 2 pieces of my portfolio. But the amount of research and learning made this experience well worth its while. So I want to talk about them, the meaning and the execution of these works and why they are important to me as personal narratives and also some of the challenges that I overcame along the way. These paintings are both oil on board, 3 feet by 3 feet, and it was a massive challenge to paint them roughly the same exact way to allow them to interact with one another and achieve that kind of synergy. As soon as I nailed a technique on one of them, I would have to nail it again perfectly on the other painting. So these twin paintings represent a great emotional dilemma. Grief struggles to let go while penance longs to atone. Freud spoke of splitting of one's ego in the plurality of psychical persons and the coexistence of 2 contradictory attitudes. We wage war within ourselves and at times one's heart against the mind. A painting is a still image, a moment stuck in time. The artist is challenged to tell a story that has no beginning and no end. Therefore, we have to create a narrative through the intersection of the symbols that we depict on our paintings in order to really deliver and tell that story effectively. So the overall design always begins in figurative art with the human figure, which is the most prominent and relatable subject in the artwork. So I pose my figures to convey emotion. In the grief painting, you will see a sorrowful outreach for that which is lost, an expression of heartbreak and the agony that accompanies it, but also an expression of finally releasing something that is already gone. In Penance, indicative of regret and supplication. I painted the veil roughly the same way in both of the paintings, both to obscure the faces and allow them to become completely engulfed and enshadowed by their respective veils. This is symbolic of hiding, of shame, secrecy, and the loss of one's identity. The grief painting is loosely based on the overall composition of the Tarot 6 of Swords, alluding to transition, moving forward from a difficult period of time, and leaving behind that which no longer serves us, letting go of the past to unburden themselves for what lies ahead. In the Penance painting, the composition was loosely based on the 5 of Cups in Tarot, to allude to family matters and marriage, loss and gain. Every object in these paintings is a character that plays a supporting role to the human figure, both to support the narrative and also to convey its own meaning and emotion. The 6 of Swords, again, is a nod to the Tarot 6 of Swords, but it also conveys sharp, penetrating objects. The repetition in the design is meant to create visual tension, designed to remind the viewer of the overall feelings of being stabbed by swords, the pain, betrayal, and the anxiety that comes along with that. The goat skull is a very familiar motif that is presenting in many of my artworks, but for me it is also a symbol of death and of loss. The extinguished candle is symbolic of an end, the action of blowing out a candle and snuffing out of one's light to relinquish hope in the flames of love and of passion. The wilted roses are symbolic of the decay of unrequited love and of heartbreak. In the Penance painting, the clock is a nod to the Tarot's 5 of Cups, but also the still clock alludes to the idea of being stuck in time or transfixed in a moment or in a memory. Like Salvador Dali's melting clocks, time is subjective, and so a person may find themselves stuck in that moment of despair and of rumination. There are 5 glasses portrayed in Penance, or 5 cups in the Tarot, 2 which are broken and 3 which are empty. The 2 broken glasses signify the breaking of bonds and of promises. The 3 remaining cups are empty, symbolizing loneliness and desolation, the longing for kinship and of fulfillment. The overturned wine bottle is indicative of the spilling of blood. It should remind a viewer of an act of violence or of wrongdoing and the consequences of perhaps the artist's own indulgences and the aversions to alcohol. And the noose is, of course, a harrowing symbol of death, grief, tragic loss that is lurking in the dark background of the Penance painting. So posing and photographing the model was a huge part of this process, and I'm very fortunate to have close friends willing to pose for me in exchange for food and drinks, of course. So in my mind, I knew what the poses should be to convey the emotions that I was after, and in using a high contrast light design, it really accentuated the drama. Figurative artists are challenged to create an illusion of reality in a fictional space. So I had to create the composition to include the figures and also the objects in an atmospheric room that looked believable and looked like all of these characters were in this actual space that didn't really exist. So I worked closely with my mentor, Eric Johnson, at key points in this process to fine-tune my techniques to achieve realism and get a stronger sense of light and of color. So I ended up posing myself to get a sense of what the light should be, and then I was tasked to study the underlying anatomy to really get it right. When painting the veils, this demanded subtle hue differentiations in the color, especially in the blacks. So instead of using just flat black paint, I was tasked with adding these deep dark reds, dark greens, and dark blues and integrating them together to achieve the overall light and the texture. I focused first on the overall light design, but also the weaves and the patterns, using small brushes at the finish to convey the texture of the fabric. I used thin layers of glazes to achieve the luminosity and the texture of the clock and in the glasses, letting each layer dry before applying the next. I used a dry brushing technique to create the effect of the smoke for the candle, and many transparent layers to create deepened shadows in the figure, while also building up the lighter values with layers of fine dry paint. When I put my brushes down, I know that this is the very best that I can possibly do in this moment of my career. Could there be adjustments? Could they always be better? Of course they could, but I will get better too as I progress as an artist. I'm proud of what I accomplished here. This was a massive undertaking for me, a whole year of dedication, research, and practice to really get these down. If you're really interested in dark, emotional, figurative art, I'm going to be documenting my process as I move forward. I hope you will follow me in my process. This is my first video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next painting.